White woman took black CEO's first-class seat. Minutes later, the airline froze. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into this incredible story. It was a late evening flight from New York to Los Angeles, aboard one of the most luxurious airlines in the world. The kind where the seats were made of Italian leather, the service impeccable, and the passengers were the elite of society. Among them was Michael Thompson, a self-made billionaire, and the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company. He had earned his place in the world, building his empire from scratch, overcoming adversity, and proving himself time and time again. As he made his way to his seat in first class, a sense of pride washed over him. He had worked hard for everything he had, and tonight was a reminder of how far he had come. But little did he know, his evening was about to take a turn. As Michael approached his seat, his eyes widened in disbelief. There, sitting comfortably in his first-class seat, was a woman. She was white, dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, and had a smug expression on her face. She didn't seem to care that she was in his seat, nor did she acknowledge the discomfort she was causing. Michael, trying to maintain his composure, politely tapped her on the shoulder. "Excuse me, I believe you're sitting in my seat," he said calmly, with a polite smile. The woman looked up at him, her eyes flickering with surprise, then quickly dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "Oh, I don't think so," she replied with a smirk. "I'm sure someone else will find you another seat." The arrogance in her tone was unmistakable. Michael stood there for a moment, stunned. He had seen this kind of behavior before. People who thought they could take whatever they wanted, simply because they had money or status. But what happened next was beyond his expectations. The flight attendants approached, but the woman refused to move. She argued that she had been mistakenly given this seat and wasn't going anywhere. Her words were sharp, dismissive, and as if she believed she could get away with anything. The flight attendants, trained to maintain order and calm, stood at a loss for how to handle the situation. Michael stood quietly, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He was used to people disrespecting him or underestimating him, but this felt different. This felt personal. As the minutes passed, the tension on the plane grew. Passengers whispered, some tried to intervene, but the woman remained in his seat, refusing to budge. The air seemed to grow thicker with every passing second. Michael could feel the weight of the situation, and for a moment, he considered walking away, letting it go. But that thought was fleeting. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about respect. This was about standing up for himself and not letting anyone walk all over him, no matter how powerful they thought they were. Then, something unexpected happened. The pilot, who had been informed of the situation, walked down the aisle and stood beside Michael. With a stern look, the pilot addressed the woman. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you'll have to vacate that seat immediately," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "If you continue to refuse, we will have no choice but to make an emergency landing and have you removed from the flight." The woman's face paled, and for the first time, she seemed to realize the gravity of her actions. The passengers were silent, watching the exchange with bated breath. What happened next would leave everyone on that flight stunned. The woman stood up, her face red with embarrassment, and without a word, walked to the back of the plane. The flight attendants quickly rearranged the seating, and the flight continued without further incident. But Michael knew that this moment would stay with him forever. It wasn't just the seat that had been taken from him. It was the respect he had earned that had been trampled on. And in that instant, as the plane continued its journey through the skies, Michael realized that sometimes, the smallest moments can make the biggest impact. As Michael sat back in his seat, the tension from moments earlier still hung in the air. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him. The plane had started moving again, and he could feel the eyes of the other passengers on him. Some were watching with curiosity, others with disbelief, but all of them were keenly aware of the situation that had just unfolded. Michael leaned back, trying to let go of the frustration that had been building up in him. It wasn't just about the seat anymore. It was about respect, dignity, and the principle of standing up for oneself. He had always prided himself on being calm under pressure, on keeping his emotions in check. But what had just happened on this flight had shaken him. The woman's arrogance, her sense of entitlement, it wasn't something he had ever tolerated. The flight attendants resumed their duties, but there was an awkwardness in the air. Michael could sense it. He could tell that some passengers were still murmuring about what had just happened, while others simply sat quietly, unsure of how to react. The hours stretched on, and the tension slowly began to fade, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just occurred. He'd always been in control of situations like this. He was a CEO, a powerful man in his own right. But this moment, this small, yet significant moment, had given him a reminder of the world outside of his power. For the first time in a long while, he realized that even those with power sometimes needed to be reminded of their place. As the plane flew on, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the cabin. Michael looked out the window, lost in thought. He thought about his journey, about everything he had worked for, and how, despite all of his success, moments like this still seemed to challenge him. He wasn't used to being disrespected. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially by someone who didn't seem to understand the weight of the world he had carried to get to where he was. But there was something about this situation that felt different. Maybe it was the way she had dismissed him so casually, or how, in that brief moment, she had thought that her privilege could shield her from any consequences. Or maybe it was the realization that she had taken something from him that he couldn't get back, his peace of mind. Michael wasn't sure what had come over him, but something inside him had snapped. It wasn't about the seat anymore. It wasn't even about the woman. It was about the respect he had earned and how, in that one instant, it had been trampled underfoot. He wasn't about to let that go unnoticed. When the plane finally landed in Los Angeles, Michael stood up and stretched. His back ached from the long flight, but there was something else that weighed heavily on his mind. He had a meeting scheduled for the next morning, but before he could think about business, he needed to take care of this situation. He knew the woman was still in the airport somewhere, and as he walked down the aisle toward the terminal, he found himself scanning the crowd for her. He wasn't sure what he would do if he found her. Would he confront her again? Would he seek some kind of apology? Michael didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let her behavior slide. He walked past the security gates, scanning the crowd for any sign of the woman. It was then that he saw her, sitting at a cafe near the baggage claim, her face buried in her phone. She looked just as smug as she had earlier, completely unaware of the storm she had left behind. Without thinking, Michael walked over to her. He stopped just a few feet away, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman looked up, surprised to see him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was thick, almost palpable. Michael broke it first. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I believe we need to finish our conversation from earlier." The woman's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. "What do you want?" she asked, clearly irritated. "I want you to understand that you cannot treat people that way," Michael replied, his voice calm but resolute. "You took my seat, and you made a scene in front of everyone, thinking you could get away with it. But the thing is, you can't. You can't just trample on people and think there will be no consequences." The woman scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh please," she said, brushing him off. "Get over yourself." But Michael wasn't backing down. He stood there, unwavering, as he looked her in the eye. "No," he said, his voice hardening. "I don't think you understand. It's not just about the seat, it's about respect. You don't get to treat people like they don't matter because you think you're above them. That's not how the world works." The woman opened her mouth to argue, but for the first time, she seemed to hesitate. The words caught in her throat, and her expression faltered. Michael watched her for a moment, waiting for her to respond. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a loud screech. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Michael stood there for a moment, watching her go. He didn't feel a sense of victory or satisfaction. In fact, there was a part of him that felt empty. But as he stood in the bustling airport, surrounded by strangers, Michael realized that sometimes standing up for yourself wasn't about winning. It was about making sure that, no matter how big or small the moment, you never let anyone forget that you matter. I have to admit, Michael wasn't sure what he had expected when he confronted her. He wasn't looking for an apology, nor was he looking for any sort of validation. But something shifted in him after that encounter, something he couldn't quite put into words. He had stood up for himself, for the first time in a long while, and that felt like a small victory in a world that often tried to make him feel invisible. But that night, as he settled into his hotel room in Los Angeles, the reality of it all started to sink in. The confrontation had been a momentary release, but it didn't change the world. It didn't fix the systemic problems that people like him had to face every day. Still, it had been important, and he realized that there were more battles to fight. The next morning, he had an early meeting with some potential investors, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman in the airport. What had driven her to act so brazenly? What made her think she could get away with such disrespect? And why had he let it bother him so much? As he walked into the conference room, the familiar weight of his responsibilities settled back onto his shoulders. The meeting started, and he tried to focus on the numbers, on the business at hand, but his mind kept wandering. The woman, her words, her attitude, it all kept replaying in his mind. He was used to the high-stakes world of business, but this felt different. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just about one rude passenger. This was about something much bigger, about people who felt entitled to trample over others, who thought they could take whatever they wanted without consequences. He couldn't shake the feeling that the world was becoming increasingly divided. There were those who had everything and took it for granted, and then there were those like him, who had fought for every inch they gained. Michael had always believed in fairness, in the idea that hard work should be rewarded. But that belief was being tested. After the meeting, as he made his way back to his hotel, he decided to take a walk to clear his head. He needed to think. He had built his company from the ground up, but there were moments when it felt like he was just another pawn in a much bigger game. He had spent so many years fighting for a seat at the table, but he had never really questioned the power dynamics that shaped the table itself. And now, as he walked through the streets of Los Angeles, he realized that maybe it was time for a change. As he strolled past the crowded streets, the bright lights of the city began to blur. He found himself wondering if there was a way to make a difference, not just for himself, but for others like him. People who had worked hard, who had proven themselves, and yet were still pushed aside by those who thought they were entitled to more. That night, as he lay in bed, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let this moment pass without doing something. He wasn't going to just move on and forget about it. He would take action. He didn't know exactly what that action would be, but he knew it was time for him to step up in a bigger way. He had spent so many years focusing on business, on growth, on profits. But now, it was time to focus on something bigger. It was time to start fighting for what was right. The next day, Michael called a meeting with his top executives. He outlined a new vision for the company, one that focused not just on profits, but on social responsibility. He made it clear that they would no longer sit idly by while inequality and disrespect ran rampant in the world. From that day on, his company would stand for something more than just success. It would stand for fairness, for integrity, and for doing the right thing, no matter how hard it might be. As Michael spoke, he could feel the weight of his words. This wasn't going to be easy, and it would take time, but it was the right thing to do. And as he looked around at his team, he saw the same determination in their eyes. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt like he was finally in the right place, doing the right thing. The flight incident, the woman in the airport, had been a turning point for him, a catalyst for change. And as he sat back in his chair, he realized that sometimes, the smallest moments can lead to the biggest changes. The world wasn't going to change overnight, but he was ready to do his part. It was time to rewrite the narrative, and he was going to be the one to start that story. As Michael sat in his office the following week, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made the right decision. The new direction for his company was a bold one, and he knew it would take time to implement. But something deep inside him told him this was exactly what he needed to do. His company, a multi-billion-dollar tech giant, had been built on the principle of innovation, but now it was time to innovate in a different way, by leading with integrity, fairness, and a commitment to social responsibility. The world was changing, and Michael knew that in order to truly make a difference, he had to change with it. He didn't just want his company to be successful. He wanted it to stand for something greater. A few days later, Michael found himself attending a charity gala, a gathering of the elite in the business world, where the conversation was always about profits, mergers, and acquisitions. The event was being held at a luxurious venue in downtown Los Angeles, and the atmosphere was filled with the clinking of glasses and the soft murmur of business deals being made. Michael had been invited as a guest of honor, but his mind wasn't on the event itself. He couldn't help but reflect on his decision to make his company more socially responsible. He had spent most of his life chasing success, but now he was beginning to realize that success wasn't just about money. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. As he entered the grand ballroom, he was greeted with the usual smiles and handshakes. People were eager to talk to him, eager to pitch their ideas, eager to be in the presence of someone who had made it to the top. But Michael wasn't in the mood for the usual small talk. His mind kept drifting back to the woman on the plane and how her actions had set everything in motion. He couldn't shake the feeling that what had happened was more than just an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a much larger problem, a problem that needed to be addressed. As he made his way to the bar, he saw a familiar face, Sarah, a prominent philanthropist, and one of the key figures behind the charity event. Sarah had been involved in numerous social causes over the years, and she was someone Michael respected. He walked over to her and struck up a conversation. "Sarah, it's good to see you," Michael said, offering a firm handshake. "I'm glad to see you're involved in another great cause." Sarah smiled warmly, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "Michael, it's always a pleasure to see you, but I can tell something's on your mind. You seem a bit distracted." Michael hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's this company of mine," he said, his voice low. "I've spent so much of my life building it, but lately, I've started to question whether we're doing enough. There's a bigger issue at play, and I don't think it's enough just to make money anymore. We need to be doing more for the community, for people who are overlooked and underestimated." Sarah's expression softened. She knew exactly what Michael meant. "I've been saying the same thing for years," she said. "It's easy to get caught up in the business side of things, but the world needs more than just profits. We need to make sure we're leaving a positive impact on the people around us. You're in a position to do something big, Michael, and I think now is the time to do it." Michael nodded, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. He had been looking at the problem from the wrong perspective. It wasn't just about changing his company. It was about changing the way the entire industry viewed its role in society. It was about creating a ripple effect that would inspire others to do the same. That night, after the gala, Michael made a decision. He was going to launch a new initiative within his company, one that focused on giving back to the community, empowering underrepresented groups, and promoting diversity and inclusion at every level. It would be a massive undertaking, but Michael knew it was the right thing to do. He couldn't wait to start. Over the next few weeks, Michael worked with his team to develop a comprehensive plan for the initiative. They would partner with local schools, fund scholarships for disadvantaged students, and create mentorship programs for young people who wanted to break into the tech industry. They would also invest in programs that promoted social justice, environmental sustainability, and equal opportunity. It was a bold vision, but Michael was committed to seeing it through. As he finalized the details of the initiative, he thought back to that moment on the plane, when he had confronted the woman. That moment had sparked something inside him, something that had been dormant for far too long. It had reminded him that no matter how high you rise, you can never forget where you came from and the people who helped you along the way. And it had reminded him that, in the end, it wasn't the money or the power that mattered. It was the impact you made on the world. Michael's new initiative was just the beginning. He knew that real change would take time, but he was ready to fight for it. He was ready to lead with integrity, to inspire others to do the same, and to prove that success could be measured by the difference you made, not just the wealth you accumulated. And with that, Michael Thompson felt a sense of purpose he had never felt before. As the weeks passed, Michael's new initiative began to take shape. His team worked tirelessly, drafting plans, meeting with local organizations, and building partnerships with schools and mentorship programs. But while the logistical side of things was coming together, Michael couldn't ignore the voices in his head. The voices that questioned whether he was truly making a difference, or if this was just another attempt to improve his company's image. His mind kept wandering back to the people he had encountered throughout his career, the people who had been underestimated or ignored. The memory of the woman on the plane, who had made him feel so small, still haunted him. It was clear that there was a bigger issue at play, one that wouldn't be solved by just one company making a few donations. Real change, Michael realized, would require a shift in the way people thought, a cultural change that could only come when the powerful and privileged started seeing the world through the eyes of those who had been left behind. But Michael knew that he couldn't solve this problem alone. He began to speak more openly about the initiative, sharing his vision with other leaders in the industry. He wanted to challenge them to think beyond profits, to consider their role in society, and to ask themselves what they were doing to make the world a better place. To his surprise, many of them were receptive. Some were even eager to get involved. Michael felt a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in a long time. The more people he spoke to, the more he realized that there was a growing movement in the business world, a movement that was about more than just making money. It was about making a difference, about using influence for good. It was about showing the world that the powerful didn't have to be selfish, and that success could be measured by more than just a dollar amount. But even as the initiative began to gain traction, Michael knew that there would be obstacles. Not everyone was going to be on board, and there would be those who tried to undermine his efforts. It was already happening. There were whispers in the halls of his company, questions about whether this was really the right direction, whether they were moving away from what made the company successful in the first place. Some of his investors were nervous, worried that social responsibility might hurt the bottom line. Michael had expected this resistance, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with. The pressure mounted, and for a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake. But then he remembered why he had started this journey in the first place. He thought about the woman on the plane, how her disregard for others had driven him to make this change. He thought about all the people who had worked hard and never received the recognition they deserved. And he thought about the future, about the world his children would inherit. Michael knew that the path he had chosen wasn't going to be easy, but it was the right one. He couldn't back down now. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. And so, he pushed forward, determined to see this through. Over the next few months, the initiative began to take off. Schools reached out, eager to partner with his company and take part in the mentorship programs. Local businesses offered their support, and his employees rallied behind the cause. The shift in the company's culture was palpable. People were beginning to feel like they were part of something bigger, something that mattered. But there were still those who doubted. Michael faced criticism from some of his competitors, who accused him of being too idealistic. They mocked him, saying that his focus on social responsibility would only lead to failure. But Michael refused to be swayed. He knew that success wasn't just about the numbers. It was about leaving a legacy. He had started this journey not to make more money, but to make the world a better place. And as the initiative gained more momentum, Michael realized that the true reward wasn't in the success of the company. It was in the lives they were changing. He saw the impact firsthand when a young girl, who had once dreamed of becoming a software engineer but had been held back by financial struggles, received a scholarship from the company. She stood in front of a crowd, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude, and thanked Michael for giving her a chance. That moment was everything. It was proof that the change he had set out to make was real. And that night, as he sat alone in his office, Michael couldn't help but smile. This was what it was all about. It wasn't the wealth or the power that mattered. It was the difference he was making in the world. And he was just getting started. As the months rolled on, Michael's initiative continued to grow, and so did the challenges that came with it. Despite the early success and the overwhelming support from the community, not everyone was convinced. The higher-ups in the industry, the ones with the power to influence real change, remained skeptical. They questioned whether this shift in focus towards social responsibility would truly pay off in the long run. They feared that it would alienate customers and investors who were primarily concerned with financial gains. Michael had expected resistance, but the weight of the doubt from his peers and investors began to wear on him. The pressure was mounting. Every day felt like a battle, and the weight of his decision was heavier than he had anticipated. But in those moments of doubt, Michael remembered the faces of the young students whose lives had already been impacted by the initiative. He remembered the girl at the scholarship ceremony, her tears of gratitude as she spoke about her dream of becoming a software engineer. That moment had reaffirmed everything. It wasn't just about building a profitable company. It was about building a legacy, one that would stand for more than just wealth and success. As Michael sat in his office one late afternoon, reviewing the latest data and projections, he received an unexpected phone call. It was Sarah, the philanthropist he had spoken to at the charity gala months ago. Her voice was calm, But Michael could tell that something was different. Michael, I've been hearing incredible things about your initiative, Sarah began. The impact you've made is already being felt, but I want to challenge you to take it a step further. I've been working with a group of industry leaders who are committed to making real change. We need your company to be at the forefront of this movement. Together, we can make a lasting difference, not just in the tech industry, but across every sector. Michael leaned forward in his chair, listening intently. Sarah's words resonated deeply with him. This was exactly the kind of support he needed. People who understood the vision and were willing to back it with action. What do you have in mind? He asked, his curiosity piqued. I want you to join us in creating an industry-wide standard for social responsibility. Sarah explained, a framework that can guide companies across all sectors in how they can give back, promote diversity, and make sure that the communities they operate in are benefiting from their success. We need to shift the entire industry's mindset. And you, Michael, are in the perfect position to lead this. Michael felt a surge of excitement. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. This wasn't just about his company anymore. It was about creating a movement, a revolution in the way businesses viewed their role in society. I'm in, Michael said, his voice filled with conviction. Let's make this happen. Over the next few months, Michael worked closely with Sarah and the group of industry leaders to develop a comprehensive framework for social responsibility. They called it the Empathy Initiative, and it was designed to help companies evaluate their impact on the communities they served, promote ethical practices, and ensure that diversity and inclusion were at the core of every decision they made. It wasn't easy. There were countless meetings, negotiations, and setbacks along the way. But Michael didn't waver. He knew that this was his chance to make the kind of difference he had always dreamed of. Slowly but surely, the initiative began to gain traction. More and more companies signed on, committing to adopt the framework and use it to guide their operations. The ripple effect was real, and the message was clear. Business could be successful and still do good in the world. Michael watched in awe as his vision took shape, as industry leaders who had once been skeptical now rallied behind the cause. It wasn't just about profits anymore. It was about purpose. And the more he saw the positive changes, the more he realized that the true measure of success wasn't the financial bottom line. It was the difference they were making in people's lives. One afternoon, as Michael walked through his office building, he paused to look out the window. He saw his employees, working together, collaborating on projects that were changing the world. He saw the young interns who were excited to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And he saw the community outreach programs that were flourishing, providing opportunities for people who had been overlooked for far too long. Michael felt a deep sense of pride. He had started this journey not knowing where it would lead. But now, as he looked out over the company he had built, he realized that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. There would be people who tried to undermine the progress they had made. But Michael was ready. He was more determined than ever to lead his company, and the industry, in the right direction. It wasn't just about money or status. It was about making the world a better place, one decision at a time. And as Michael took that moment to reflect, he knew that he had made the right choice. His company wasn't just successful, it was making a difference. And that was a legacy he could be proud of. Months passed, and Michael's initiative continued to gain momentum. His company had become a model for others to follow, and Michael couldn't have been more proud of the progress they had made. The ripple effect had spread far beyond his expectations. Other companies, big and small, were beginning to adopt similar frameworks, realizing that their success didn't have to come at the expense of the community. Michael had created a movement, and it was just the beginning. The changes weren't just happening within the business world. Michael's personal life was beginning to shift as well. He found himself spending more time with his family, more time with his children, and even taking moments to reflect on the life he had built. He had spent so many years focused on business, but now he was seeing the bigger picture. His kids were growing up, and they were witnessing firsthand the values that he had instilled in his company. His daughter, Emma, had been especially vocal about wanting to make a difference in the world. She was a teenager now, and she was beginning to understand the impact that Michael's work was having. One evening, while they were having dinner, Emma turned to Michael. Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what you've been doing with the company. It's really cool how you're helping people. But what about me? What can I do to help too? Michael smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Emma, you already are helping. The example you're setting by caring about others, by thinking beyond yourself, that's the first step. You don't need a business or a company to make a difference. Emma's eyes lit up. I've been working on an idea. For a school project. I want to create a campaign to help bring awareness to environmental issues. Do you think I could get some help from your company? Michael was taken aback. He had never really considered involving his family in the business side of things, but Emma's passion was undeniable. He knew she was ready to take on something meaningful. Of course, Michael said, his voice filled with pride. I think it's a fantastic idea. Let's talk about it more. And so, over the next few weeks, Michael and Emma began working together on her campaign. It wasn't something that was going to make headlines or change the world overnight, but it was a step in the right direction. Emma's campaign focused on raising awareness about sustainable practices at schools, promoting recycling, and encouraging students to take action. It was grassroots, but it had the potential to reach a lot of young people. Michael was proud of the way Emma had taken the values he had worked so hard to instill in his company and applied them to her own life. It was a reminder to him that the real change often starts small. Sometimes it begins with a single idea, a single conversation, and a single person willing to take a stand. Emma's campaign was a success, and the local school district adopted several of her ideas. She didn't stop there. As she continued to grow, Emma began to think about how she could take her message even further, reaching a broader audience. For Michael, it was a powerful moment. He had always seen himself as a leader in the business world, but now he realized that his leadership extended beyond the boardroom. It extended to his family, to his children, and to the legacy he was leaving them. His vision wasn't just about the company or the impact he could make in the corporate world. It was about creating a future where his children could continue the work he had started. Meanwhile, the business continued to flourish. Michael's company was thriving, not just financially, but in terms of its social impact. The partnerships they had established with schools, nonprofits, and community organizations were paying off. More young people were getting opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise, and companies were following Michael's lead, adopting social responsibility frameworks of their own. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had always known that success wasn't just about making money. But now, as he watched his daughter take on a leadership role of her own, he realized that the true measure of success was the legacy you left behind, the difference you made in the lives of others. It was a humbling thought, and for the first time in a long while, Michael felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. His journey had been about much more than just financial success. It had been about creating a company that could make a difference in the world. It had been about teaching his children that success wasn't just measured by wealth, but by the impact you had on others. And as he sat down with Emma that night, looking at the campaign she had started, he knew that the legacy he was building wasn't just one of business accomplishments. It was a legacy of compassion, leadership, and a commitment to making the world a better place for future generations. As the months continued to pass, Michael began to see his efforts truly come to life. His company, which had once been driven solely by profits and competition, was now making a real impact in the world. The ripple effect of his initiative had gone beyond anything he could have imagined. More and more companies, particularly in the tech industry, began adopting the framework of social responsibility that Michael had pioneered. It wasn't just about giving back anymore. It was about a fundamental shift in how business was done. It was about building businesses that worked for the greater good of society. And Michael wasn't just watching from the sidelines. He was actively involved, meeting with leaders, speaking at conferences, and pushing the envelope of corporate responsibility further than ever before. But it wasn't always easy. Despite the success, there were still many who questioned his approach. Some investors remained skeptical, concerned that Michael's new direction could ultimately hurt the bottom line. Others within the company were uncertain, still tied to the old ways of thinking. It was in these moments of doubt that Michael drew strength from his family, especially Emma. He saw the way his daughter had grown in confidence and passion, and it reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about the company's success or legacy. It was about creating a world where future generations had the same opportunities he had worked so hard to build for himself. One afternoon, Michael sat down with Emma at their kitchen table, a quiet moment between them after a long day. Emma had just returned from a school meeting about the environmental campaign she had been running. She was excited, animated as she spoke about how much progress they had made. Her peers were getting more involved, and the school had started implementing some of the sustainability measures she had proposed. "Dad, you were right," Emma said, her eyes wide with excitement. "It feels amazing to be able to make a real difference." Michael smiled warmly, proud of his daughter's determination. "You're the one making the difference, Emma," he said. "You're showing people that it's possible to change the world, no matter how young you are." The conversation turned to their shared passion for making the world a better place. Emma had started thinking bigger. She was already brainstorming ways to expand her environmental campaign beyond her school and into the wider community. "What if we could partner with some of the local businesses to get them to adopt more sustainable practices?" Emma suggested. "Maybe we could even bring your company in on it, too." Michael paused, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter was beginning to understand the true power of what they had started. It wasn't just about making changes within one organization or one community. It was about bringing people together, sharing knowledge, and creating lasting change. "I think that's a great idea," Michael said, "and I'd be happy to support you in any way I can." The conversation left Michael with a sense of peace. He had spent so much of his life building an empire, and now he was watching the next generation take the baton and run with it. Emma wasn't just following in his footsteps. She was forging her own path, one that was just as focused on making the world a better place. Over the next few weeks, Emma's campaign grew. She formed partnerships with local businesses, arranged meetings with environmental groups, and even reached out to other schools to spread the message. Her efforts were starting to catch the attention of local media outlets, and soon, people outside of her immediate circle were noticing the change. The ripple effect continued. Michael's company, with its new initiative, became a cornerstone for these efforts. The work they were doing to help underprivileged communities, promote diversity, and provide mentorship to young people was making waves in the industry. And as more companies joined the movement, it became clear that the tide was turning. But just as things were starting to feel like they were in motion, Michael received a phone call that would shake him to his core. One of the company's largest investors, someone who had always been supportive of Michael's vision, was pulling out of the company. The reason? They no longer believed in the new direction the company was taking. They felt that the focus on social responsibility was not in line with their financial interests. The news hit Michael like a punch to the gut. It was a blow to the progress they had made, a harsh reminder that not everyone was ready for change. For a moment, he felt lost. How could he continue to push forward when someone who had been a key player in the company's success was turning their back on him? But as he sat at his desk, thinking over the call, he remembered the many people whose lives had already been impacted by the changes they had made. He thought of Emma and her campaign, of the students who had received scholarships, of the families who had benefited from the mentorship programs. He realized that he had already made a difference. He wasn't going to stop now. He couldn't. This was bigger than one investor or one setback. This was about something far more important. The legacy of building a company that didn't just thrive on profits, but also on making the world a better place. Michael made his decision. He was going to continue pushing forward, no matter the obstacles. He would work harder, with more resolve, and bring in more people who shared his vision. And as he looked at the progress Emma had made, he knew that no matter what happened next, the future was in good hands. As Michael walked through the office one morning, he paused in the lobby to take in the scene around him. The company had changed, and so had he. The hallways, once filled with the noise of deadlines and profit targets, were now vibrant with the sounds of teamwork, purpose, and passion. Employees chatted about new projects that would help lift underrepresented communities, and the offices were decorated with posters promoting diversity, inclusion, and sustainability. This wasn't just a company anymore. It was a movement. Michael had seen many changes in his career, but none as transformative as this. He had started out as a businessman, focused solely on profits and growth. But the journey he had taken over the past few years had opened his eyes to something far greater than financial success. It was about building something that could make a lasting difference, not just in the business world, but in the lives of individuals and communities. The initiative had grown into something that was now being replicated across industries. Companies were no longer focused solely on their bottom line. They were considering their impact on the world, on people, on the planet. The ripple effect had become a tidal wave, one that was reshaping how business was done. But with all the success and progress, there were still challenges to face. Michael's former investor, who had pulled out of the company months earlier, was not the only one who was still skeptical. There were others who doubted the long-term sustainability of the company's focus on social responsibility. Yet, as time passed, it became clearer that the people who doubted were being left behind. Michael's company had proven that doing good in the world was not just the right thing to do. It was also profitable. More importantly, it was the future of business. As Michael sat in his office that morning, he received a message from Sarah. It was an invitation to speak at an upcoming global business conference on social responsibility and corporate impact. The message was simple but powerful. "We've watched you lead the way, Michael. Now, we need you to share your story with the world. The world needs to hear what's possible when companies think beyond profits." Michael smiled as he read the message. It was a reminder of how far they had come and how much further they could go. He wasn't just leading a company now. He was leading a movement. He thought about Emma, his daughter, and how she had embraced these values from such a young age. The way she had started her own campaign, the way she had inspired others to think differently about sustainability, had made him realize that the future of this movement wasn't just in his hands, it was in the hands of the next generation. That night, Michael found himself sitting at the dinner table with his family, reflecting on everything that had happened. Emma was now a young adult, working alongside him in the company, continuing her own projects to inspire change. His son, Noah, was becoming more involved in local community work, volunteering at shelters, and working on programs that promoted education for disadvantaged youth. "Dad, do you ever stop and think about how much things have changed?" Emma asked, her voice filled with a mix of pride and amazement. Michael smiled, looking at his children, who were becoming the kind of leaders he had always hoped they would be. "Every day," he said, his voice soft but confident. "But the change isn't finished yet. We've done a lot, but there's still so much more to be done." They all sat there for a moment, the weight of their shared journey hanging in the air. Michael realized that this was what mattered most, the legacy they were building together. It wasn't just about business. It was about values, about kindness, about making the world a better place for everyone. As the years passed, Michael continued to lead with the same vision he had when he first started, to build something that would not only succeed but leave the world in a better place than when they found it. His company continued to grow, and with it, the movement he had ignited. The ripple effect became a worldwide movement that was changing industries, communities, and even the way people thought about success. And one day, many years from now, Michael would look back on all he had accomplished and know that he had done more than build a successful company. He had built a legacy. A legacy not defined by profits or status, but by the difference they made in the world. And that, Michael knew, was worth everything. In this powerful story, we follow the journey of a CEO who faces both personal and professional challenges that transform his life. As he deals with a difficult encounter during a flight, he embarks on a mission to create a company that values social responsibility over profits. Along the way, his actions spark a larger movement, inspiring others to think beyond their own success and focus on making a meaningful impact. The story explores themes of leadership, integrity, and the importance of social change. As the CEO works to create a legacy that not only benefits his company but the community as well, we witness the ripple effect of his actions across various industries, as more businesses follow his example. With a strong focus on empowerment and fairness, this Black story highlights the importance of giving back and striving for a better future. Through this journey, the CEO discovers that true success isn't measured by financial gain alone, but by the positive difference one makes in the world. As he navigates his personal growth and the challenges that come with leadership, the story unfolds with moments of reflection and inspiration that remind us of the power of change. The ripple effect from this CEO's actions continues to spread, creating a global movement where companies begin to prioritize ethics and social good, showing the world that it's possible to lead with both integrity and success. This Black story shows how one man's commitment to fairness and responsibility can lead to an entire industry transforming for the better. It's a tale of redemption, change, and the pursuit of a greater purpose that resonates far beyond business success.